On November 20th, 2022, the long-running AMC television series The Walking Dead completed a 177-episode run over the course of 11 seasons. Yeah, I'm surprised to know it was still going on too. But if you were to be told in the heady years between the premiere of the show in 2010 to its 5th season in 2014 that it would last 11 seasons, you wouldn't be surprised. Year on year, during the first half of the 2010s, The Walking Dead was consistently one of the most watched and critically lauded television series of its era, along with the likes of Game of Thrones and Breaking Bad. Which is a real achievement considering that it managed to poke through the sea of zombie-related media that reached its greatest depths in the early 2010s. While Walking Dead held the title of most visible zombie television show during this time, it was far from the only one. Along with films that stretch beyond the usual constraints of the zombie genre into the likes of romantic comedy.
What's wrong with me? I just want to connect. Why can't I connect with people? Oh, right. It's because I'm dead.
To previously unrelated video games suddenly shipping with a zombie horde mode.
Oh my God!
Zombies. Gentlemen, at times like these, our capacity to retaliate must be and has to be massive. Gentlemen, lock and load.
It seemed like we couldn't get enough of blasting open the undead like piñatas. You know, until we did get enough. But now that the times have passed us, I do find myself wondering why we found the zombie genre so fascinating to begin with. There's been many postulating answers to the question, but the one that I feel holds the most water was put forth by comedian Patton Oswalt's essay, Zombie Spaceship Wasteland, from the book of the same name. In it, he describes the tropes and structures that we typify with specific subsections of the science fiction genre: the zombie story, the space adventure story, and the wasteland story. He further expounds on the appeal of all three, and how they would attract certain demographics of impressionable teenagers, all collectively struggling with the understanding of the adult world beyond the walls of high school. Bereft of actual lived experience, either by being too young or being socially cast out for one reason or another, one might find the appeal of the zombie genre in its nature of simplifying what is immeasurably complex. Zombies simplify. They don't understand the world any better than spaceships or wastelands, but they sure like the houses and highways. Every zombie story is fundamentally a breakdown of order, with the infrastructure intact. It's a microcosm of archetypes, fighting for survival against the undead hordes. The zombie genre presents a world that is both familiar, yet simplified, where the complexity of social interaction is distilled down to an elemental us versus them. Indeed, in many a zombie story, the most pressing moral concern lies not in turning our shotguns on what used to be our fellow man, but in what might very well wind up on the wrong end of our muzzles.
I'm sorry, Mom.
And in such a world where our protagonist must live by means of death, a climactic catharsis can really only be found in maintaining humanity, especially as those who welcome callous pragmatism or outright savagery finds themselves at home in their new world. True to form, such a nihilistic world should also engender grim and acrimonious stories of survivors not being able to get along, further subdividing the us into yet another camp of them, which are apparent in even the earliest roots of the zombie genre, Night of the Living Dead.
Now, you get the hell down in the cellar. You can be the boss down there. I'm boss up here.
You bastards!
And indeed, all of these points and examinations are present and accounted for in Highschool of the Dead, and no examination of the history of the zombie in pop culture ephemera is complete without it. Premiering during the heart of the zombie genre's popularity in 2010, and directed by Tetsuro Araki, the same director behind the first 3 seasons of Attack on Titan, Highschool of the Dead might be the most archetypal American zombie story in anime. Unlike with other anime that have zombies in them, your Hellsings, your Corpse Princesses, Highschool of the Dead focuses on what many American zombie stories focus on: the breakdown of order, society, and trust. It's just that it features cheesecake. A lot of cheesecake. I mean, it's still an anime. This episode of Anime Abandoned is brought to you by Rosetta Stone. For over 30 years, Rosetta Stone has been the #1 language learning app, trusted by teachers and the biggest companies from all over the world. With an approach that has you learning just as a native child would, you too can become fluent in over 20 languages offered. As someone who spends a lot of time in Italy, having Rosetta Stone is a lifesaver. Vengo ancora riconosciuto come americano, ma tutti sono molto amichevoli al riguardo. Whether you're a novice or you just need to brush yourself up, Rosetta Stone has a completely customizable lesson plan to suit your needs. And with both desktop and mobile versions, it can even fit anywhere and anytime in your schedule. Rosetta Stone also offers many an affordable payment plan, but if you use my code and link in the description box, you can get full, lifetime access to every single one of their lessons in every language they have for a one-time only payment of $179. That's lessons in German, Japanese, Spanish, French, Korean, and so many more for life. So click that link in the description box and start your language learning journey today. Thank you to Rosetta Stone for being a constant supporter of the show, and thank you for your time. Please enjoy the rest of the episode. Part 1. A Cast of Archetypes. Going into the nitty-gritty details of the plot of High School of the Dead can be kind of a useless endeavor. If you've seen any zombie apocalypse story, then you pretty much know the beats like the back of your hand. It seems like a perfectly normal day for high schooler Takashi Komuro until Z-Day falls upon his school campus, and the world quickly goes to hell in a handbasket.
It looks like the police are finally using firearms, from what I can see here.
Unconcerned with giving a concrete answer as to how this zombie outbreak came to be, the show instead accelerates the outbreak to apocalyptic levels within the course of a couple of days, as Takashi, along with a handful of his classmates and the school's nurse, survives by the skin of their teeth as they search for their families. Throw in some inconsistent zombie infection time, as well as necessary twists on what separates their zombies from other stories.
Their senses are dead. They only respond to the sound. Most likely they can't see either, otherwise they wouldn't bump into the locker.
And there you have it. Instant plot. That High School of the Dead doesn't tread far from where other zombie apocalypse stories have isn't necessarily a strike against the anime, since the genre is mostly guided by character archetypes and the drama that the setting both provides and intensifies. But what I find so unique about High School of the Dead is the fact that it doesn't try to fight against the tropes of the zombie apocalypse story, so much as it reinforces them with anime tropes. The most obvious of which lies in the title itself, as the initial high school setting is as common to anime as graveyards are to horror movies. Of course, zombie apocalypses can run the gamut of settings, usually within a densely populated city, thus explaining how there are so many zombies in one place. So having a zombie story in a high school wouldn't be too far-fetched. Then again, when it comes to zombie movies, what would be far-fetched? Flight of the Living Dead, Theater of the Dead, Office of the Dead, Nudist Colony of the Dead. Why do you think I'm making this up?
The air is fresh, brisk, and sweet. Why, I could even smell your feet. It's an ingy-dingy-doo-dah morning. Ingy-dingy-doo-dah morning.
It's actually surprising to note that it took until 2006 for original manga writer Daisuke Sato to make a zombie outbreak story set in a high school. Considering the horror movie overlap the genre enjoys with the likes of the slasher genre, with its predilection toward teenage victims, you'd think that setting a zombie apocalypse story in a school would be a no-brainer. Get it? But regardless of how obvious it seems in hindsight, it's still to the manga and anime's credit that it recognized its peanut butter to the zombie outbreak's chocolate. Even character tropes that we typify with the two seem to fit together pretty nicely. Continues Patton Oswalt, usually this small group is made up of the archetypes that the teen has met thus far into his short existence. The hero, the unattainable hottie, the loudmouth douchebag, and the brainiac who knows what's going on. True to Oswalt's distillation, the show does have its hero in Takashi, as well as its unattainable, at the start of the series anyway, hottie in Rei Miyamoto and Sayeko Busujima. The loudmouth and brainiac, meanwhile, are rolled into one character in Saya Takagi.
What?
Don't you worry, Takagi.
You rude little otaku! How dare you interrupt me while I'm talking?
Oh, goody.
The only reason I have to stay with this dumbass is because Komuro isn't here. I am such a nice person.
But where zombie archetypes end, anime archetypes begin, as the show expands the central cast both in number and in personality. Saya, on top of being the loudmouth and the brainiac, is also the show's resident tsundere.
I mean, you're pretty stupid, but at least you know you are. So if I tell you that you're stupid, maybe by some miracle you'll be less stupid. Stupid.
Sayeko, likewise, is more than just the unattainable hottie, but also the beautiful fighting girl that is both ultra-independent.
And just look at me. I mean, seriously, if any of us are going to make it out of here alive, it's going to be me, right?
And also needing the comfort and guidance of the male protagonist, and perhaps even his affection. Anime's answer to the virgin whore complex. Of course, being an anime, one cannot escape the inevitable cute mascot character in both the dog Zeke, renamed Zero in the dub to fit lip flap timing, and the little girl Alice Marisato, likewise renamed Arisu for the exact same reason. Both feel right at home within an anime and zombie apocalypse context, as using animals and children as a means to contrast the horrors of the world with symbols of innocence is yet another common touchstone in zombie fiction. However, theirs is an overall minor role in the anime, having joined the cast over halfway through the season and having little by means of a character arc.
After everything that's happened before we got here, you two can't have a fight now.
After everything that's happened.
But the one I find most interesting in the cast is the prototypical otaku caricature, Kota Hirano. Existing mostly outside of Oswald's distillation, Kota exhibits some characteristics of the Brainiac by being a guntaku, and therefore knowledgeable about firearms. But he mostly serves as the show's comedic relief.
You're nobody to me. What makes you think you can order me around?
Pretty please with sugar on top?
And since I know some people in the comments are going to wonder why if I didn't bring this up, yes, this character was named after and inspired by Kota Hirano, the manga artist behind Hellsing. You think he likes guns too? Still, I feel he perfectly encapsulates why Highschool of the Dead works on a fundamental level, as well as the appeal of the zombie apocalypse as escapist fantasy.
Hey, you're on the ball all of a sudden. Something clicking you or what?
I think I found my calling.
Kota's place in the story is as much a function of humor as it is giving theme a direct voice. His very existence tells a story of a put-upon, bullied child that now seizes the opportunity to prove his mettle and worth by more direct and violent means. And sometimes, to uncomfortably real levels.
I can even kill living people too. Maybe start by the ones who made fun of me!
And in a world where the threat doesn't come from a towering beast but in shambling numbers, the means by which Kota reclaims his place in the world is uniquely universal. Not all of us have it within them to slay the dragon as if we were Siegfried, but we could pick up a shotgun and blast a zombie's head into chunky salsa. Even an overweight, uncoordinated dork can play hero in the zombie apocalypse. Granted, if they also had bullshit Delta Force training for a month.
I was trained by this instructor who used to work for a private military company, Blackwater, for a month. He's an ex-captain of Delta Force.
I know that the anime is trying to play this straight, but am I the only one who's getting girlfriend in Canada vibes? But regardless, Kota remains the character focal point where zombie apocalypse story and anime intersect. A mishmash of styles that are united by a common thread of using narrative and character shorthand to construct a story. And in doing so, Highschool of the Dead winds up informing and highlighting the archetypes and tropes of both. Even Takashi outwardly compares his traveling party to a typical party in Dungeons & Dragons, reducing them to just roles in an RPG.
And the stronger fighters we had were Saiko and Hirano. And you too. And Saya. She's the smart one.
Of course, no zombie apocalypse story is truly complete without a human antagonist, who uses the situation to selfishly gather himself as much power and control as he can, often once having a position of authority before the zombie apocalypse began. Joining the likes of Captain Rhodes, Negan Smith, and Major West is Koichi Shido, a former teacher turned quasi-cult leader who abuses his position and students for self-gratification. And he's probably the most fun part of the show. His design screams malevolence in the most anime of ways, with his steepled fingers, pointed facial features, and narrowed eyes. And as his mask of civility falls, revealing the kind of dirtbag he really is, you can tell the animators had the time of their lives animating his wild gesticulating posture as he makes his frenzied speeches to enthrall his students.
We must move forward, not backward. Upward, not forward. and always twirling, twirling, twirling towards freedom.
You just gotta love to hate this guy. But sadly, he just doesn't have a lot to do in the anime proper. After showing up at the end of the first act, he's quickly written out before the second act even has a chance to begin, only for him to finally return for one episode, where he's just kind of brushed off. Thanks for showing up, I guess. I feel like this is mostly due to the fact that the anime was banking on there being a second season somewhere down the line, and he would play a bigger role in that.
The battle of Takashi and the others will continue, so don't miss the next season.
However, the second season never came to be, despite the success of both the show and the manga. Shortly after the anime premiered, writer Daisuke Sato was stricken with illness, causing the manga to go on hiatus in 2011, which also more than likely stymied any prospect of a second season. He would pass away from heart disease in 2017. Both his editor, as well as High School of the Dead illustrator Shoji Sato, agreed to shelf the manga out of respect for Daisuke's memory. It really is a shame that both the anime and the manga wound up being left unfinished, because High School of the Dead goes for the throat. It makes no attempt to hide or disguise the fact that it is a violent zombie gore fest where characters fit a nice, neat little role to help the action along, with just enough twists and audacious flair to help give itself its own identity. And further, from a character point of view, the anime and zombie subgenre work very well together, helped along by slick, for the most part, animation and outrageous action set pieces.
God, you reek. I know you're dead, but is a little hygiene too much to ask?
There's no denying that High School of the Dead is a lot of fun. But there's also no denying that it's a huge mess. Hey, just wanted to pop in and quickly say thank you so much for watching so far, and if you've been enjoying yourself, please leave a like and subscribe if you haven't. Thanks again for your time, and please enjoy the rest of the episode. Part 2. Its own worst enemy. When High School of the Dead is firing on all cylinders, it is a devil-may-care action show with a wickedly cruel sense of humor.
We should be okay if we run together, Miss Suzu. Of course I will, because you and I are BFFs, Tashina.
A few moments later.
Damn it, bitch, I said let go!
When it's at its worst, it's attempting to be an unflinching drama that examines the precarious notions of law, morality, and society.
Why are these maniacs shooting at us?
The whole world's going crazy, Ray. We can't trust anyone.
And it's attempting to do all of this with flippity-floppity jugs. In a way, you kind of have to admire the fact that the anime gives not one flying turd whether or not all of this can coexist with each other. There was a singular vision of what High School of the Dead was meant to be. It's just that vision is a tonal catastrophe. I could go on how the show clashes with itself whenever it feels like it has to crack a dumb, unfunny joke to break the dramatic tension. Or how said dumb, unfunny jokes typically revolve around Coda being unexpectedly turned on.
They react to every little sound coming.
And I could even go on about how all the cheesecake tends to detract from the solemnity of the drama, when it's not outright taking it out back behind the shed.
We've got tons of stuff.
But the biggest issue of this tonal logjam is when the anime winds up just pissing on its own shoes. Every so often, between bouts of the viscera spectacular, the anime seems to want to grind things to a halt by shifting gears into a much darker direction, where the notion of a carnage carnival isn't nearly as welcomed, like when Takashi and Sayeko come upon a child zombie. And this is why you never see a child NPC wandering the streets of Los Santos. So, what do we get from Sayeko nearly having to drop a zombie kid outside of a nasty case of whiplash? Her admitting that she's disturbed by how much violence excites her.
I fought until there was nothing but blood and bones. It was bliss. Absolute, total pleasure.
Look, High School of the Dead, I know what you're trying to do here. But you are so not the anime to do this. It'd be one thing to have your characters remark about how it bothers them to see themselves enjoy the slaughter they leave behind.
Ever since this has happened, I've felt that way too.
It's quite another thing to spend the entirety of the anime up until now framing said slaughter as a bloody awesome spectacle. It's like, yeah, we understand why she would feel like this because we've been enjoying watching her slaughter zombies. At least we're supposed to when she does stuff like this. But her showing this level of guilt for feeling like this, only for her to buck up, after Takashi fondles her of course, and continue on her zombie slaying way as if nothing happened, is so not worth this melodramatic cul-de-sac. Using gleeful violence to create commentary on how the trauma of living through the zombie apocalypse can both harden and darken the soul, however necessary it might be to survive, is a complicated and measured task, requiring more investment and effort than High School of the Dead is willing to make. The end result is that the show feels like it's almost attacking itself, using one hand to prop up its characters for being awesome zombie-killing machines,
Holy shit, she's a maniac.
while also condemning their actions with the other. There's just a fundamental disconnect with what the show attempts to address with scenes like these, and how it operates outside of these scenes. It's the same reason why The Last of Us 2 fell so flat. You can't build a story about the toxic notion of revenge and cyclical violence while also giving the player flamethrowers and goddamn exploding arrowheads. Is it any wonder that the ending would feel ultimately hollow, or that the audience felt goaded into said hollow ending? Simply put, the series doesn't want to grasp and deal with the heavy topics it reaches for, and the tone and fun suffer for it. Perhaps if the show dialed down the action schlock and fan service, there'd be more room and incentive to actually tackle such topics with earnestness, or at the very least, not make such attempts appear to be so toothless. Then again, that would be in direct contradiction of what the series is obviously aiming for, so it just winds up weighing down the series like a boat anchor. Can a dumb zombie show just be pleased with being a dumb zombie show?
That's why we have to attack those countries who'd use intercontinental ballistic missiles against the US while we still can! Activate 666 Delta Protocol.
At least the dub leans into the cheesy nature of the anime, but even that has its hits and misses. Part 3. Foster the dub. The name Stephen Foster is a divisive one among certain camps of otaku, and not for an altogether bad reason. He's an ADR director and scriptwriter that worked for ADV and Sentai Filmworks until his retirement in 2014. Over the course of his career, he's worked on titles like Sin the Movie, Colorful, and 5 centimeters per second. Now, I find ADR directors to be like baseball umpires. If you're a fan and you know either one by name, it's because they pissed you off. So why would anyone have a problem with Foster, you may ask? Well, it helps to know that his most legacy-defining work, for both better and worse, is Ghost Stories.
Hajime, where's the bathroom?
Just piss on the Toby Keith poster.
Number 2!
If there was a centralized figure in the dubs versus subs debate, it would be Foster, with a bullet. You either appreciate his willingness to deviate from the page and ad-lib for the sake of making a memorable and entertaining dub, or you despise him for doing just that.
Leave me alone! I've got to fill out my Special Olympics application.
For my part, I feel Foster is the kind of director and writer whose talent is to bring out the humor in a comedic anime. I truly loved his work in Colorful, but nothing can save the listlessness of 5 centimeters per second. And Super Milk-chan is Super Milk-chan.
It's true that my exquisitely light touch makes all the wonderful big busted ladies I go out with go, "Oh, you're so wonderful! I'm paralyzed!"
So, on the face of it, Foster is a wonderful choice for writing and directing a dub for High School of the Dead, since his penchant for comedy and liberalized translation works within the anime's context, even when the humor baked within the animation itself never really goes beyond the usual horny guy slapstick. Foster and his cast do a good job at elevating the material, and all are at their best when they can stretch themselves out and treat the material as the zombie schlock that it is.
Double tap, baby.
The dub has personality, and it helps give the anime the kind of oomph a show like this really needs.
This can't be happening. Can it, Mommy? It's not, right?
But I wish Foster managed to rein in his worst habits, like insisting on these unwelcomed fourth wall breaking jokes that land like wet sandbags.
That's so cool.
You're such a ditz.
Well, that is my character after all.
This kind of writing just smacks of feeling like you're above the material, or you're just plain embarrassed by it. It's the same kind of mindset that's at the heart of many of the most smarmy bits of writing in comic book movies.
You actually go outside in these things? What would you prefer? Yellow spandex?
Yeah, High School of the Dead is a zombie show with fan service out the wazoo, and it's pretty damn dumb. But if you don't have the confidence to let it be dumb, then don't insult the audience by making these try-hard jokes. But his worst habit is his pop culture references.
This is exactly like that George Romeo movie I once saw.
His endless pop culture references.
Come on, at least you've seen this thing before. I mean, it was in that Mel Gibson movie.
His interminable.
And look at the slobbering idiots hinging on his every word. Like a bunch of Scientologists.
Indefatigable.
So she lives here with a friend of hers, isn't that right? Who is she? Sarah fucking Palin?
Perpetual.
This reminds me of that scene in Apocalypse Now.
Unceasing.
So you're an expert in kendo. And you have a part-time job at PetSmart.
Incessant.
Very breakfast club of you, chubby.
Pop culture references.
I can't help it. I've been so hungry ever since I started PX90.
Look, I know I'm in kind of a glass house with this, but I just cannot stand how many eye-rolling references there are in this dub. They made a meme reference, for crying out loud.
You know, you could help me out here.
Huh? I like turtles.
If you want to be charitable, I suppose you could call this a time capsule of the era, but if you ask me, this is the kind of writing that ages the worst. Which is why it's so weird to go back to High School of the Dead over 10 years later. Because for an anime that has a lot of moments that have not aged well at all, it's also eerily prophetic. Part 4, The Specter of 2020. Right off the bat, I want to make it very clear that I do not like blank predicted blank takes, because they're mostly within the domain of disingenuous, thoughtless clickbait. But having said that...
However, as this killing pandemic has continued to spread throughout the world, some people are strongly criticizing the lockdown, questioning the necessity of it.
Watching High School of the Dead after 2020 hits a whole hell of a lot different. Whether it's the city riots, the protesting over the quarantine, the cops using excessive force on the general public, the weirdly specific verbiage used when social order and trust break down.
I was wondering why high school kids were flashing guns like they were cops, but... Huh? You're just saying you're going to protect us. People out here are trying to control us with violence.
And Elon thought buying this kind of rhetoric for $44 billion was a good idea. Why?
She's a Nazi.
It all coalesces into a proverbial dark shroud that hangs over the entirety of the show that just can't be shaken off. Of course, one shouldn't ascribe too much prophetic weight to these moments, as the show uses previous points in history to pattern itself by. You know, history repeating itself and whatnot, which even the anime brings up.
The entire world is experiencing the same outbreak.
So what, it's some kind of epidemic?
This is exactly like the Spanish flu in 1918.
But the one moment that I find to be the most chillingly real comes from none other than Coda himself.
You know, people have a tendency to ignore what they don't want to see. They don't face reality because it's too much for them to handle. Ignoring our mistakes and humiliations, how do you think we get through high school?
Wait, aren't you High School of the Dead, the anime with bullet time sweater puppies? What did I tell you about that whiplash? Coming back to High School of the Dead not even 3 years after 2020 feels like having an asshole friend who constantly brings up the worst time in your life in conversation for no good reason.
Our job is to protect these people. And you watch. Now we're gonna be forced to kill most of them.
Now, the popularity of zombies had waned before 2020, certainly, but after 2020, the appeal of the zombie apocalypse story seems as far away from the public consciousness as it ever has, and perhaps ever will be. It should be noted that even though the ratings for The Walking Dead were declining year on year since 2015, it was during the 10th season, right smack dab in the middle of 2020, that the show suffered its worst rate of loss from the first episode of the season to the last, clocking in at nearly a 50% rate of loss. After facing an actual epidemic, where people really died, and having faced actual social and political unrest during a time when no one seems to trust anyone, and good faith is a 4-letter word, watching something like High School of the Dead can't help but leave you with a bad taste in your mouth. Of course, this isn't the anime's fault, nor is it the fault of any zombie story that uses a collapsed society setting, but can an audience be blamed for not wanting to be reminded of terrible times? If you placed High School of the Dead in a vacuum, then you have a really entertaining but really uneven anime. It's audacious, slick, and tickles the immature part of your brain that refuses to grow up. It's also inconsistent, melodramatic, and not nearly smart enough for it to attempt what it half-heartedly tries to do. Perhaps if history were different, the anime would have had the chance to expand itself and actually follow through. But as it is, in the world we live in now, I find it to be a kind of sad reminder of how sheltered we all were. It's a curious anime that had the fortune of being at the right place at the right time for its initial popularity. But luck doesn't last forever. As even the anime itself points out, there's no going back to the way things were.
Because life, even among the dead, keeps going.
2023 is almost upon us, and I think that there's only one anime that can properly see us out of 2022. An anime that has gotten a resurgence from an unexpected place.
I am a Shinigami, a god of death. In my realm, I am called Steve.
Till next time.